if Trump touch Iran, I think Iranians know they have to fight back. The only leverage that Iran has had against America in the last 25 years, America's endless campaign in this region, in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and others, have been to send American personnel back in the coffin. From rational point of view, Iran should have already built its nuclear bomb. From rational point of view, Iran should have already turned to the east and de-dollarize most of its economy. And the fact it's not doing is an enigmatic question. The official line is Iran is responsible for Hamas because it has given them money. Forget about money. The money is nothing. Yeah? What is Hezbollah? Is Hezbollah a stooge of Iran because Iran has given Hezbollah some money, according to Israel, $800 million a year or $1 billion a year at most, and has given them some technology? Or no, is because Hezbollah was inspired by Iran.
Hello, and welcome to Attrition. I'm your host, Ammar Kazmi, and in this show we delve into the forces of war, imperialism and Zionism, exploring their impact on our world and what it will take to overcome them. War against Iran is looming as the United States continues to build up its military presence in West Asia. A naval carrier strike group and other supporting assets are converging on the Islamic Republic of Iran, including at least 24 aerial refueling tankers, reminiscent of the build-up we saw against Venezuela last year. Iran has only just faced down Western-backed riots and acts of terrorism that have left around 3,000 people dead. However, it's clear that the hybrid war on Iran is not going away. But before we get into that, please make sure to like this video and to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. It helps me to keep bringing you content like this. To discuss the situation in Iran, I have the privilege of being joined today by Ali Alizadeh. Ali is an Iranian political analyst and broadcaster. He specializes in West Asian affairs with a particular focus on his native country of Iran. He's the founder of Jedaal TV, an independent media organization that publishes in both Farsi and English, and which has a large following within Iran and among the Iranian diaspora. Ali, thank you very much indeed for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Ammar, for inviting me and giving me this opportunity.
Well, it's my absolute pleasure to be able to host you here in person after you've been working tirelessly, giving lots of media interviews online, and there's obviously a lot for us to get into today. Before we get into talking about the ongoing threats against the Islamic Republic of Iran, which are live and obviously very important, let's first just take a step back and consider what's happened over the past 4 weeks, these protests that were hijacked by rioters and armed terrorists. This was the latest manifestation of the empire's hybrid warfare against Iran, but this has been going on for decades, of course, with currency manipulation, economic sanctions, cyber warfare, assassinations, propaganda, psychological operations, terrorism. The list is absolutely endless. Talk to me about this hybrid warfare against Iran.
I mean, the word hybrid warfare might confuse people thinking they have used some special technological means. It is this invisible ways of manipulating people, but it's not that complicated. The main aspect of this hybrid warfare is the traditional siege that used to put around cities in ancient times. And the siege would go as far as people would start eating each other, would start eating the corpses of the people. And that's the main cause. When that happens, then you can have dissent inside the castle, inside the cities, inside the citadel. You can create rumors. You can say that the enemy is going to attack tonight, and you can save yourself by opening the gates from inside, create division inside the people. So that's the main element and factor in this hybrid warfare. The fact that Iran has been under massive, endless pressure since 12th of February 1979. And I think that's better to understand this hybrid warfare if we go back all the way to the eve of the revolution, one of the four biggest revolutions of history: French Revolution, Russian Revolution, Chinese Revolution, and Iranian Revolution. One of the four classical revolutions in history according to Western and Eastern historians. And from the day that revolution became victorious, they started finding ways of doing coup d'etat, of kind of putting counter-revolutionary forces there, economic hardship, isolation, and so on and so forth. So in this round, which started from 2011, possibly 2012, with intensifying sanctions, because Iran has had sanctions since 1981, 1982. But this intensification of sanctions under the democratic Obama administration went really, really far to every corner of Iranian state, society, economy, academia, and everything. And sanction is a word, easy to say. Oh, they put sanctions on Iran. But when you live it, you realize suddenly becomes, as philosophers say, an ontological element exists within every cell of your organism, of your body. And Iran was a laboratory of sanctions. Sanction was a weapon that America created and worked on, but tested it first and foremost on Iran. The sanctions you see on Russia, for example, first were tested in Iran. The sanctions before Iran deal or the nuclear deal in 2015 were first generation of sanctions. After Trump came, they used second generation of sanctions, smarter sanctions. Before, you would put sanctions on people who work with Iran. Ammar Kazmi would be put on blacklist of America if he had sold something to Iran or had bought something from Iran. Second generation of sanctions, you would put Ammar's cousin, who had some business with Ammar, on a kind of bigger list. Was called risk-based sanctions. And so suddenly, everyone around Ammar would stop dealing with him because they would think it can be dangerous. They wouldn't even sell him a bottle of milk in London. So in a sense, they have been working on this and making it more and more complicated. It's a form of psychopathically torture a nation. As the author of the book, The Art of Sanction, Richard Nephew, says, the aim of sanction is to inflict acute pain on a nation. And what does a nation do when it's under acute pain? It screams, shouts, says, down with the regime, down with the state, down with Khamenei, comes outside. So in this chronology, the first round of these sanctions happened in December 2017, January 2018, much smaller scale. And the first time we heard the slogan, pro-Pahlavi slogans. And about 27 people got killed. And the economic pressure was somehow that from that time, still there were like few wave of currency depreciation, inflation jumps. And by November 2019, you had the second big, massive riots. This time, the urban poor in big cities, Tehran, Isfahan, Shiraz, came outside, and we saw signs of kind of pseudo-militarization of the populace. And of course, the rumor was there were cells or squads operating around and coordinating. But whether this narrative is true or not, when we look at the fact that both by media or operations, by Iran International, BBC and others, and also by American authorities who were provoking and pushing people to the street, we can see that that's hybrid warfare. If you are a very disenfranchised and impoverished person in the fringe of Iranian city, working with $150 a month, and you're coming outside and the president of the strongest country in the world says, I will have your backing. I will send help soon. I'm sure, that will send you all the way. Imagine what would happen in 2011 when riots happened in London. And I lived in London at the time, so I witnessed it firsthand. Imagine if Putin had come out and say, we will have the backing of these rioters, or in BLM, in Black Lives Matter, if another president across the world would say, we will have your backing. go and fight for your legitimate right. It will change the coordination of the protest completely. I'm sure it would encourage the protesters to go much more radical. So that was in 2019, and the death toll went all the way up to 220 officially. Maybe there were more people. And it was like really, really shocking because not for the first time, but the state had shot its own base. People who were shot, they were not middle class asking for westernized life. They were mustazafin. They were the downtrodden on earth. They were the ones who had been supporting the state. They've been supporting the revolution. They've been sending the kids in 8 years' war with Iraq to become martyrs. Yeah? So in a sense, that was a rift, and that shocked the base of the Islamic Republic as well. Then in 2022, you had Woman Life Freedom with a different composure in which it started by women asking for the rights, and it was middle class, but lower middle class. You have to understand Iranian society has changed very rapidly, and that's the result of the revolution. It's not that Iranian state and Iranian revolution are regressive. People are modern, and this contrast has caused people to fight against the state. Is much more complicated. If Iran didn't have the revolution, and if the monarch, the pro-Western monarch, was still in place, Iran would have been much, much, much more traditional today. And the fact that all these women now either are asking for more individual freedom or they're asking for more Western style rights is because in the last 4 decades, Islamic Revolution and Islamic Republic created a public space safe enough for traditional families to send their daughters to go to school, to go to university, and to find a space in social life. That brought with itself more demands. Whereas during the Shah time, which Shah was encouraging and pumping people to send your kids to universities and schools, traditional family, which were the majority of Iranians, wouldn't send that. They didn't trust the public space. They found it rotten. They found it un-Islamic. They found it unholy. So in a sense, these are the result of the social contradictions and historical contradictions created by Islamic Republic.
And Iran also has a higher percentage of women graduates compared to men. So women are actually proportionately more educated than men in Iran.
100%, yeah. There's a thirst. This is a contradiction. Let me just tell you, Ayatollah Khamenei, because he encourages women to study, and someone said, but these women don't have enough jobs to go to, because this discrepancy of like 60% or 55% to 45% male students in university then is not translated in the same ratio in the job market. Then you have like about 20% women working in unofficial job market, and many of them stay unemployed. And famously, Ayatollah Khamenei said, studying is a virtue itself. So no, we want them to study. So it shows you the contradictions there, yeah? And these contradictions have to be resolved by the people themselves. These contradictions are not to be resolved by Washington. Anyway, so in 2022, it started by this demand, legitimate, and it was presented in the form of riots. So without much direction. Very soon, it got co-opted and it got infiltrated. So what happened? It has some elements in Kurdistan because Mahsa Amini, who got killed or died, she was from Kurdistan. And so Kurdish separatist movement suddenly started doing certain skirmishes, attacks to the security forces. And then in Balochistan, there was some unrest as well. So it created ethnic unrest. And then they were narrated all together as one and same thing, as Jina revolution, as woman life freedom. Whereas in Balochistan, there were like Salafi tendencies who would not allow the women to go out in normal time. You had like the Friday prayer of Balochistan, of Zahedan, who was a very traditional man who came in support of this movement. So you could see that these uneven elements are being put together to give a narrative of regime change. And we were looking deeper at that time, and we would see many of the Zionist elements across Iran trying to create agitation, especially in Kurdistan, which is Iraq's Kurdistan, which is very close to Tel Aviv, and they were sending forces inside Iran. And even for, I think for 18 hours, 20 hours, Marivan, one of the important cities, fell to the hand of the protesters. Yeah? So these are places with like ethnic discontent and ethnic fault line, and they weaponized it massively, and very quickly they militarized it. And even they were talking about bringing no-fly zone to one of these cities as early as 2022. So that was 2022. And then we come to this round, which you have to understand, this is a round after the 12 Days War. This is a round after the economic hardship has been intensified. Trump has come to office and he's like doubling down every few months. Yeah? So everyone expected this to happen. Back in September, I said in one of my programs that this is going to happen and this is going to take 10 times more death toll than November 2019. And the reason for that was because I could see sanctions are deteriorating the societal resilience. Let me just give you a simple example. It's like when you go to Ramadan, the first few weeks might be difficult, but still you have some fat on your stomach, yeah? So your body is like eating from the fat. Towards the end, all the fat's gone. In Gaza, the first few months, the hunger was more tolerable because the body had something to live on, the fats from before. And then when the fat's gone, then the pain becomes very acute. So in 2011, when the sanctions started, you would go and take one of your kind of wife's earrings, one of the kind of golden belongings that you had, and you would sell it, and then you would swear at the state, but you would continue another few months. Now, everything has been sold now. It's the year 14 of sanctions, and the year 14 of also, in my opinion, mismanagement, because we can go through it in more details. We are dealing with a very complicated situation in which sanctions from imperialist center is trying to destroy the Iranian people, Iranian nation state, but then counter-revolutionary and pro-Western elements inside the state are also working hand in hand with the sanctions, are the ones who from inside the citadel are trying to open the gate to the enemy. And that has caused a problem even more, because if, for example, Iran had acted like Russia did after 2022 sanctions, and after like the sanctions imposed on Russia due to the Ukraine war, had acted in a more united way and had leashed and bridled Iranian oligarchy, Iranian pro-Western oligarchy, I think the country would have had more resilience. Ayatollah Khamenei said in 2010, as early as 2010, that Iran needs economy of resilience. Iran needs to find a way to bring to make the economy more tolerant towards sanctions. Iran needs to turn to the east. Now it's 2026 now, and still there is a massive division in the state. Where to go? Shall we move to the east? Shall we not move to the east? And so this division inside and the stakeholders which have been shaped around the sanctions has almost paralyzed the country from within. So,
well, who is pushing this pro-US direction? I mean, Ayatollah Khamenei has said many times that Iran should not be engaging with the United States. He also said that the reason that Iran doesn't trust the United States is very simple. It's because of experience. I mean, even a casual observer can see that and notice that. You can take the JCPOA, for example, the nuclear deal, which was betrayed, and we see the West constantly breaking its promises, engaging in deception. This is Einstein's theory of insanity, doing the same thing again and again and again, and expecting different results. So why hasn't Iran turned to the east, to China, rather than constantly seeking to win over and gain concessions from the West?
That's the $1 million question. And I think that's why some people call Iran a suicidal state at this stage, because from Mearsheimer's idea that the states are rational entity, rational machines, and so they work towards their own self-survival. And from rational point of view, Iran should have already built its nuclear bomb. From rational point of view, Iran should have already turned to the east and de-dollarize most of its economy. And the fact is not doing is an enigmatic question. Why is this happening? Because I think the counter-revolutionary forces have the upper hand in Iran. Because if you look at Iranian kind of post-revolutionary time from 1979 to 1981, when there is a what you call post-revolutionary battle of hegemony between the secular left or Marxist organization, nationalists, mujahideen, and then pro-Ayatollah Khomeini, pro-Velayat Faqih forces, they're like fighting against each other. And by 1981, is more or less consolidated, and Islamist forces win the battle of hegemony, but then they are in the middle of war with Iraq, and so the country has a form of wartime economy, is run by Mir Hossein Mousavi. It is a kind of welfare state, and it's incredible how you think Iran, with a very small budget of selling about $5 billion oil a year, which is nothing. Even now under sanction, Iran sells 60 billion, just to give you an example. But Iran has the most rapid form of development in history of human being of welfare indexes and criteria. So child mortality goes from 113 to 10 in 1,000 during these first 10 years of revolution, while Iran is in the middle of war. Life expectancy goes from 54 to 65, 70. And then the state gives clean water to most of the villages, gas pipes to every point in the country. It's incredible that a country coming out of revolution with a broken bureaucracy and then immediately fallen into a war by Saddam and helped by all Arab countries around it, still manages to create an outstanding welfare state. What happens to end this revolutionary state is 1988. The war is finished. Soviet Union is dead. The left Khomeinists, as I call them, the left side, the left faction of Khomeinis, which is like Khat Imami, as they call them in Iran, they are almost put into exile. They are pushed aside by Rafsanjani after Ayatollah Khomeini's death. And the state start doing structural adjustments coming directly from IMF, even though the West has never accepted Iran into WTO. And Iran does its own homemade IMF style reform in the hope that one day they get elected. Who are doing these? Iranian bureaucrats and technocrats who had just come back from LSE, who had just come back from Reading University, from Essex, from different British universities, especially British universities, and have been experiencing the ideology of third way and thinking the welfare state is finished and we have to do it as fast as possible. And that's what happens in Iran during 90s onward. So you have neoliberalization from within in the hope of being accepted to WTO. And then the other side, which is like more or less represented by Ayatollah Khamenei at the level of national security and regional matter, stands against being co-opted by America or surrendering to America's demand. So you have this contradiction inside Iran. Rafsanjani faction wants to take country all the way to be co-opted and to be integrated into a kind of pro-Western world order. And Ayatollah Khamenei insists on Iran having self-sufficient military capability. And these two have been fighting against each other since almost 1992, 1993. I have to say, Ayatollah Khamenei is not pro-welfare state necessarily. He doesn't have much say in economy. His main focus has always been on question of military, question of foreign policy, and question of national self-determination. Yeah? And that's part of my criticism for him. I think he needed to combine this with an economic program as well. He does talk about economic nationalism, the necessity of turn to the east, but I can explain to it later why these wars do not get much traction. But this is like these two camps inside Iran have been almost exhausting each other. So Iran's internal dynamic does have some positive aspects because it produces a semi-democratic system in which some of the discontent among the nation can be resolved by going to election. So you have this like ebbs and flows. You have principalists, conservatives, they used to be called before. In the West, they call them hardliners. We can call them realists, whatever you call them, as one faction, usul garam, and then the reformists, pro-Western, whatever you want to call them, on the other side. And they've been exchanging the power at the level of executive branch, and that itself has allowed the state, allowed the people to express themselves to some level. But I think at this conjuncture, the damaging element of not having a united state, being able to decide which direction to take in foreign policy, is much more than the benefit. For example, Rafsanjani, who was like one of the pillars of revolution, he went through this, what we call istihale. He went through this like metamorphosis, and he became so pro-globalization that he famously said, the world of tomorrow is not the world of missiles, because Khamenei insists on having missiles and longer range missiles. The world of tomorrow is a world of dialogue and conversation. And he said that when he was like the second or third man in Iran, a country surrounded by 26 American bases. And that tells you, and he's like the godfather of reformism, the godfather of Kargozaran Sazandegi, or the main neoliberal kind of party, the godfather of Hassan Rouhani, the president. He's like the founder of one main faction in Iran that rules over Iran's technocracy, the biggest part of Iran's bourgeoisie, artists and the cultural elite, cinematographers, and all of them like were following him. And that line itself, that the world of tomorrow is not about missiles, it's about dialogue, explains to you the thirst to be integrated in pro-American system.
Well, let's get into this a bit more deeply, this phenomenon of Rafsanjanism that began in the 1990s and this reformist movement that was then, of course, boosted by Khatami and then Hassan Rouhani and Javad Zarif and so on. What is this reformist tendency and what exactly do they want?
First of all, it's an organic part of Iranian revolutionary community, and it is a child of its own time. So it would be unfair to say they are counter-revolutionary, they are like only pro-Western figures to be purged. But then something has happened. It seems that they've been frozen in the time of their inception, and they haven't understood the change of the world order in the last 10, 15 years. And second is a question of political economy, which we didn't get a chance to talk until now so far. So let me just take you through this. From 1988-89, that Rafsanjani became the president and helped assigning Ayatollah Khamenei as the leader, he wanted integration into the West, a structural adjustment, and then he brought a lot of technocrats who were graduated from the West. But it's not that strange. It's 1990. Who else would say anything otherwise? Who in 1990 wanted to, for example, talk about multipolarity? No one. That was the only horizon available at the time. And these people wanted development. They didn't want to become Cuba. So they were really scared of becoming an autocratic, self-isolated and self-sufficient country, and then economically they go down. So in order to, as they say, grow the economic cake and make it bigger, before distribution among the poor, they want to like invite foreign capital. They want to like bring foreign companies. None of them happened ever, but the West always kept it as a possibility. And then Iran's internal political economy took shape. Then came reform in 1997 with the promise of political reform, multipolarity, kind of civil society, and then there was a way of opening Iran to the West. But then what happened with Bush era somehow forced the other side to come with a realist approach and stop this reformism, because reformism were trying to go along with America's demand of Iran's self-disarmament. No more missile, no more drones, no not working on nuclear program, etc. So came Ahmadinejad in 2004, 2005. Very popular, a populist movement, and he was lucky, or some people say he and Chavez helped increase the price of oil. So a lot of oil revenue came to Iran. And what happened by 2009? The reformist faction almost did a coup d'etat against him. They brought him to paralysis, even though it was delivered via a social movement, very big social movement. I started my political activism by being member of Green Movement, but later on I realized, first of all, the election was not rigged the way that they represented it, and they brought down Ahmadinejad. They exhausted the state, and Ayatollah Khamenei backed off. So even though he cracked down on the kind of the movement, but 4 years later allowed Rouhani from Rafsanjani's faction to come back to the state. And what did Rouhani do? He accepted partial disarmament of Iran by accepting Iran deal. What was Iran deal? Iran, which was already building 60% uranium and was very close to become a nuclear power, nuclear state, gave up all its enrichment in the hope of releasing sanctions. Sanctions were not released. So from here onward, you have this endless fight between these two factions. One of them says there is no other future for Iran apart from Iran making negotiation and detente with America. So Trump came out of Iran deal. What happened? What did Rouhani do? Did he turn to the east? No. Did he make a compensatory deal with Russia? No. They waited. They waited with the promise of E3, Britain, Germany, and France, that they are going to open some small avenues and streets to help Iran overcome sanctions. They didn't do it. The procedure was called instex. At the end, only gave Iran $1 million of letter of credit. $1 million, whereas Iran lost about $60 billion a year at least for about 5 years, about $300 billion. So they gave $1 million. That's a joke. Europe humiliated Iran. And inside Iran, these people were just only doubling down, saying that Khamenei is like responsible for this because he's not making compromises. He's not making compromises. He should do that. I have to say one more in addition as well. Rouhani's era was one of the most disastrous era in the history of post-revolutionary Iran. And I'm amazed, and I think people should be amazed, why Khamenei didn't purge them, why they didn't crack down on that faction when they were so disastrous. Because let me just give you an example. The first few years with the promise of negotiation with America, things were more or less okay, even though we know today, with the information we have from the previous head of central bank, the reason that currency was okay, economy was better, was not the promise of negotiation with Obama. Rouhani was selling Iran's gold in the market, was emptying Iran's national resources in order to keep his base happy. Then Xi Jinping came to Iran on 6th of February 2016, 2 days after Iran deal was implemented. He came with a proposal saying that now that there's no sanction, we can work as much as you want. This is my package, $600 billion package for the next 10 years of development infrastructure. Let's just be good partners. Now America is not a threat to us anymore. Here, China had come to Iran before in 2009, before sanctions started, and Iranians didn't go with him because of the unrest inside and the lack of unity in the state. Now, the Chinese didn't help Iran much during sanctions. Of course, I mean, sanctions were strong during Obama. And then they came immediately after. Rouhani famously, and that's not an anecdote, that's a reality, they put him in a hotel. They didn't put him in a palace or anything. And the story goes, they put him in a room without toilet. He had to go to the corridor for he was like, they humiliated him. And Rouhani left Iran for Italy while Xi Jinping apparently still was in the country. So they humiliated China. These people who are still part of the state, who are constantly complaining that Khamenei has destroyed the country, IRGC has destroyed the country's economy is a result of resistance, is a result of insistence on keeping Iran's defense capability. They are responsible for this. They had many options, but they wanted to work with Europe. And you can ask me why. Because they have defined the political project via this Western-style democratization. Because the children all study in London, New York, Washington, Toronto, Sydney, and other European places. And also the bourgeoisie which is connected to them, because you may ask me, Ali, why they don't work with China? If they are corrupt, if they are into nepotism, if they are into kleptocracy, they want money, why they don't earn it from Shanghai? Because they don't trust China for a place as a haven for the money, whereas they can buy more property in London, in Dubai, in Turkey, in Canada. So that's one of the problems. They are the reason that the Republic has become weaker and weaker. They are the reason that the Republic didn't dare to go head-to-head with Israel on 7th of October. Iran has an internal domestic sickness. And Ayatollah Khamenei hasn't been strong enough to cure this sickness from inside. And there's a reason. I mean, because the other side is very strong. In 2009, when they came out on a street, they could paralyze Ahmadinejad, who had at least 20 million votes at the time. All the urban poor were with him. He had massive popularity in the region. And Iran was on a strong hand, had won a war against Israel in 2006 in Lebanon, had pushed America out of Iraq. Obama surrendered and left. So Iran was on a strong hand, and they destroyed Iran from inside, domestically. And so Iran had to make concessions. So Ayatollah Khamenei is making concessions, doesn't want to create more dissent internally.
Ali, these people call themselves reformists, but it seems that many of them are just helping the enemy.
They every time they raise a white flag from inside for the enemy, and that's why Pezeshkian is president now. Why do you think Pezeshkian is the president? As a very incompetent person who doesn't even have popularity inside Iran at the moment, because Ayatollah Khamenei and the state predicting and anticipating a more intensified clash with Israel, they wanted reformists to be on the side of a state. They thought if something like 2022 woman life freedom happened and they're against a state, their weight will be added to the weight of enemy and will be crushed. So at least this time, they are not on the side of protesters. They are not on the side of international community. So he bribed them. And I think it's wrong. I think the future for Iran through this endless concession with the elite is very dark and very dangerous. I think Iran should fight against its corruption, should fight against the oligarchy, and I think there are still enough number of people loyal to revolution and loyal to the national cause of an independence that can rally around the flag, as we've seen during the 12 Days War, that instead of making concession to elite and bribing them, which only result in more corruption and more economic hardship, the Republic should come back to people. The Republic should remember it's a republic. The Republic should be reborn from within. And I think it's one of the last chances. What we saw in this last round of protests is the base of Republic are exhausted by economic hardship themselves, and they may not be around for the next round. So I think that's the problem. So inside Iran, even this shortage of dollar is happening by part of the oligarchy. And let me just say as the last thing, because from 2016 when Trump came back, 2017, there were three different solutions. Solution one, let's go and negotiate to uplift and move sanctions. It's not possible. Trump has shown sanctions will never be lifted for generation after. Even if you give America whatever they want, they will not lift sanctions. Number two, let's continue with this kleptocratic, corrupt way of bypassing sanctions. Take the money to Dubai from one bank account to the next one, and then the next one then goes to Oman, come back, and there's a political economy around it. Community of stakeholders who are like vultures, like leeches, are drinking the blood of Iranian people. And then their hand is on their, as we say in Farsi, on their Emiratis' knife. All the offices are in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, a place that Israelis are operating so freely. So if Israelis go to these children of oligarchs in Iran, or what they call them, trustees, who are in charge of bypassing sanctions and say, keep the money, we're going to confiscate your money. OFAC is operating there. Everything is happening under OFAC monitor. So America allows this bypassing of sanction. And the third way, which was being discussed by revolutionary forces, was neutralizing sanctions by restructuring economy. If you work with China, you can work on yuan. You don't need dirham. You don't need dollar. Your main economic partner is China. From $130 billion a year, about $118 billion a year of your foreign transaction is only with one country, China. Why do you need to send yuan to Dubai, convert it to dirham, and then from dirham to dollar, and then send it to Brazil to buy, for example, material that you need? Yeah? Why? It can go from China. And these people who don't allow this happen because they have a lot of interest. That's why at this stage, I think the Republic needs to deal with its own problem, at least in the way that Putin did with his oligarchy. Or if you want even more disgusting version, Ben Salman did in Carlton Hotel, Ritz Hotel, with his own oligarchy. You cannot have an oligarch who are working in line with America, who are creating a situation ripe for riots and hybrid warfare, and then only blame the nation for coming out. Yeah? So I think we have to stay here. I know a style of Ayatollah Khamenei. He's a conservative leader in the sense of his leadership and management. He doesn't want to do things in a very drastic and very dramatic way. He's absolute opposite of Trump. So we have to wait for this round of inflamed crisis to settle down in the next few weeks. But if we pass this very inflamed phase and the security is restored, I hope that the state start its crackdown on its own elite, because I think the options are limited otherwise.
Ali, I want to turn now to the ideology of the 1979 Islamic Revolution. In the West, most people's understanding of the Islamic Revolution is superficial, that it's anti-US, anti-Zionist, and so on. We don't hear much about its wider political and economic prospectus. So what exactly was the ideology of this revolution?
I mean, no revolution has a direct ideology. It's like every faction has its own interpretation. That's why you have Faith and Terror in Hegel's phenomenology about French Revolution. Every faction tries to interpret the truth of the revolution, and these factions come into fight with each other. That's why you have post-revolutionary battle of hegemony. Here you have Marxists, you have, as I said, Islamists, you have Islamic Marxists and the hybrid versions, and each one has its own interpretation. But the motto of revolution was istiqlal, independence, azadi, freedom, adalat, justice, and Jumhuriyet Islami, Islamic Republic. That's something that Ayatollah Khomeini announced in Paris. And I think istiqlal was very important because Iran, even though Iran has never experienced direct colonization, Iran saw itself as a semi-colonized country. Iran was a country that Americans ran it after a coup d'etat in 1953. And so people had this experience of not having independence. And whatever they want to say up until today, I think this is the most important one. The independence was delivered. Iran, one of the criticism I have today about Iranian state of not turning enough to the east is justified by the fact that we don't want to go to any camp. We want to be truly independent. And so that's something which is like deep rooted in Iran. You know, even in the hardest time that Iran was threatened by America, they didn't allow a single Russian base to come inside Iran. And so this is a principle accepted by more or less everyone. And that's why the wave of people coming on the street now, they are so counter-revolutionary. They are not creating something new. They are not going beyond the revolution. They're going back. They are saying that no to Gaza, no to Lebanon, yes to Trump. So the fact that they are undoing the independence, they are saying that we don't want the independence in a kind of either reactive way out of desperation, almost like trying to tear apart the social contract of the revolution, tells you that the independence has been a big, important principle and pillar. The question of freedom, that's more complicated because now the official story in the West is that the state has killed 4,000 people, 3,000 people, whatever. And so I'm coming out and saying that freedom was delivered as well to some extent. Would be very controversial, but I think I want to say that it was delivered. Why it was delivered? Because Khomeini empowered millions of people who hardly had any right, even in their own village. He brought them to political arena. He created political subjects. When you watch the images of these mustazafin, these basijis in the wartime, the bottom line Basiji, who hardly can read and write or maybe is illiterate, the way that he's questioning the IRGC commanders is like so horizontal. There's a revolutionary time.
What are Basijis, just for people who are unfamiliar?
Basiji is like militia that was created after revolution. You had like army, and the post-revolutionary state didn't dismantle the army, kept the army, but then was a bit suspicious. Alongside that, they created IRGC, Revolutionary Guards, and which was made of normal, ordinary people who had some experience from some revolutionary background, and they started creating these guerrilla-style military force. And then they had Basij, they had militias of ordinary people who would volunteer to go and fight and to go and try to protect the cities during the time of terror, for example, by Mujahideen and things. So, but what I'm saying is the relationship between Basijis and the higher ranks were so horizontal. So they felt they are subject. One of the reasons that Iran is like boiling constantly with discontent in comparison with neighboring countries is because you are dealing with citizens which may not have many rights, but they have many demands, and they feel entitled to these demands. Where does these demands come from? From revolution, because revolution created these political subjects. In the pre-revolutionary time, they didn't know that they're entitled to freedom of speech, to talk. These things are not coming from the West. They're not coming from watching BBC Persian service and thinking you have Western-style human right. It comes because you feel, my uncle got martyred in the war. I have been doing this and that for the revolution. I am entitled to this. Why you're not giving it to me? And that's why the political consciousness in Iran itself is the product of 1979 revolution.
But you see this with many revolutions where the gains of the revolution end up causing the revolution problems. I mean, some people call this the revolution eating its own children. This has happened in Cuba, for example, where illiteracy was eradicated. There's free education, free public health care, and all of that creates a high quality of life and it produces comforts, but that in turn broadens people's horizons, perhaps in an unrealistic and unsustainable way, and so they just want more. And that's obviously understandable. People want their needs met and things like that, but it's wanting more without looking back and seeing just how far they've actually come from where they were before. And I think that we see that same phenomenon in Iran.
That's right, because revolutions are Khomeini said, our revolution was enfijar nur, was explosion of light. But I would say revolutions are explosion of contradictions. It accelerates the speed of social development and social change. So that was the freedom, which is like, I can say. So the demand of the people with what the state is offering them is always in discrepancy, and so the state is always in deficit. And the third one was adalat, and the justice. And as I said, in the first 10 years, this social welfare created in Iran, a country under war and sanction, is still, I mean, I challenge anyone who can say Iran didn't deliver a universal healthcare, universal education, and didn't really deliver on that promise. Of course, the speed declined after 1990, and I see that in the, especially Iranian Marxists, Iranian lefties writing for European and Western journals talking about neoliberalization in Iran. I'm a critic of Iranian neoliberalization, and I'm fighting against it inside forces. But I think depicting Iran as a full neoliberal country is wrong. It's still Iran. In Iran, you have a health service which is superior to Egypt, to Jordan, to Turkey, to many other countries in the region. And so for a country under so much sanction, sometimes you have access to services which you hardly can get. I mean, you have to wait 6 months in NHS. It's a third world country under sanction. And yes, as a revolutionary in Iran, I would think you should have invested much more on healthcare. And every time I've been to national TV in Iran, I've been like showing Iran's constitution that providing healthcare is the duty of a state. But when I've come and talking to Americans and to Europeans, I'm not going to say it's a neoliberal state. No, they still spend a lot of their budget on this. Education, yes, education has declined. They have introduced private schools, and they have taken 30% of students to the private sector, which is wrong, and 100% against it. Yeah? But still, the state is providing education for everyone. Yeah? It's not with the standards of 1980s. We should have had much better education system. But still, the state is providing services. It's important to say that, because the alternative that America, Trump, and British government and Israel are trying to create for Iran is like a broken, failed state with no hospital running, with no education at all. So don't forget that while Iranian state has many deficiencies, it still is a more or less working state with a deteriorated but nonetheless existing welfare system. That's important to remember. So that was the adalat as well. So these are the promises of revolution for inside the country. But the problem comes that revolutions do not stay limited to the borders. French Revolution scared the ruling class in Britain and in other countries across Europe. So did Russian Revolution. And Iranian Revolution scared the monarchies, the pro-American monarchies in the region, to the death. The king of Saudi Arabia, the ruling class in Emirates, in Bahrain, in all around the region, they were terrified that the message of Iranian Revolution is disseminating and propagating very fast, faster than the speed of light. People were watching it in the region and across the world, thinking, if this mullah sitting on the floor under an apple tree in Neuf-le-Château in France can crack down what Carter only a year ago had described as island of stability, the pillar of American strategy in Middle East, the gendarme of Persian Gulf, everything is possible. So I think that was the second message, or intended or unintended message of the revolution. The revolution had the message that we want a free region. We don't want independent Iran, because it's not possible to be independent only on your own. Same as Russia. I mean, Russian Revolution knew that you need to move towards a global revolution. But Iran wanted to work towards an independent Middle East. How is it possible to be independent while you have Israel? How is it possible to be independent when you have pro-American regimes across the region? And that's
Well, we're coming up to the 47th anniversary of the 1979 Islamic Revolution, so this conversation is very pertinent. We've discussed how the revolution changed the game within Iran, and you were just touching on how it's altered things for the wider region. Obviously, this was a hugely significant moment in history. How has the 1979 Islamic Revolution changed the position for US and now, of course, Zionist hegemony in West Asia? Because Iran has served as a bulwark against that domination and really is the final wall blocking its expansion, which is obviously why they continue to do everything that they can to assault Iran and why they're so desperate for the Islamic Republic to fall.
So who was the first guest who came to Iran after the revolution? The revolution, the victory day of revolution is 12th of February 1979. And I think on 13th of February, who was the first foreign guest to Iran?
Yasser Arafat.
Yasser Arafat. And that was the message. We're not going to be alone here. We are going to go with people of Palestine. And then the day is very important. The year is very important, 1979. Why is it important? Because only a few months apart, something happens called Camp David. So when America thought we put the last nail to the coffin of Palestine and we managed to give Israel what it wants, and we destroyed Israel's biggest enemy, which was a Nasserite Egypt, which was coming out of Arab National Socialism with true popular support, and it was defeated to its death. And then in Camp David, it was humiliated, and it made Egypt as it turned back into a semi-colonial state, depending its economic survival on a stipulant from United States, a bit of like breadcrumb here and breadcrumb there for Egyptian army and for people not to have bread riots. And that was the massive victory for Israel and America. And Iranian revolution exactly said, okay, Egypt is not there. We are coming up to fill the gap. That's why this coincidence was important. So when Israel and Zionists thought we defeated our biggest enemy, something big came here. Of course, if you listen to Israel's official narrative, they say in the 80s we didn't care about Iran because Saddam Hussein still was trying to be the continuation of Egypt. And with oil money, he was trying to be the flag bearer of anti-Israeli and freedom of Palestinians. But I think when you look at the popular level and at the level of movements, Iranian revolution is the reason that you have Hamas, you have Hezbollah, you have Ansarullah, you have many movements across the world, and including, you still have, you have the revival of Muslim Brotherhood. Again, it's a controversial thing to say, and I'm not saying that because the official line is Iran is responsible for Hamas because it has given them money. Forget about money. The money is nothing. Yeah? Hamas gets much more money from Qatar than gets from Iran. So it's not about money. It's about the idea. The idea of Iranian revolution and the political energy it created in the region truly inspired and re-energized and revived especially Muslim movements in the region. And it showed you the possibility of fighting against imperialism, colonialism, and Zionism with empty hand. What is Hezbollah? Is Hezbollah a stooge of Iran because Iran has given Hezbollah some money, according to Israel, $800 million a year or $1 billion a year at most, and has given them some technology? Or no, it's because Hezbollah was inspired by Iran. They learned that it's possible that groups of ordinary South Lebanese young men and women create guerrilla warfare, which for at least 40 years put Israel in its place. And the only force in Arab world has pushed Israel back to its previous border. I mean, we forget sometimes that because of Hezbollah's recent kind of events and recent pushbacks. We forget what Hezbollah achieved in this region. Hezbollah achieved something that Egypt didn't achieve with the help of Soviet Union. A small group of guerrilla forces did something that Nasserite Egypt didn't manage, to free land from Israel for the first time ever since the creation of this entity here. So, and I'm saying that Hezbollah's power comes from being inspired by Iran's ideology, the ideology of self-determination based on your own native religious belief, based on your own entitlement to your country. So it's not very complicated. And I'm against over Islamicized interpretation of Iranian revolution. I think Islam was there as the native cultural and political resources of that nation. Iranians were Muslim for 1300 years. So they used their own resources. If it was in Vietnam, they would have used something else. If it was in South America, they would have used something else. Yeah, but that's why all this essentialist reading of Islam is trying to somehow subside and reduce its universalistic element and appeal, because I think Iranian revolution even inspired people in non-Islamic world and non-Islamic countries, because who would think that a state so powerful and so armed to teeth by America would go away so quickly? And let me just kind of go with this one, because we forget the image. Because now with what we've seen in Iran, all this protests, riots, whatever you want to call it, and they call it revolution now. But revolution was in Iran when you had for a year, protest after protest after protest with empty hand, not a single act of violence, Iranian revolution was the first true velvet revolution in history. It's very funny and very ironic and painful, because they associate and attribute so much political violence to Islam and to Islam in an essentialist way. But among all revolutions in history, and among all social movements in history, Iranian revolution won with the least political violence possible, because Khomeini brought millions to the street. He didn't need violence. The violence only happens at the very end, and that's when a significant part of the army has defected and have made allegiance with Khomeini. They've come out and they met with Khomeini. A lot of soldiers have defected and have come and joined the people. Shah has left the country. A lot of ministers have left the country. The state has already fallen. And that's the time that Khomeini says, now you're allowed to enter police stations and military bases. That's only the last week of revolution. So revolution starts from January 1978, goes every 40 days of ceremonies and funerals after funerals. And by September, Shah kills a lot of people and becomes bloody. Still, people don't move towards insurrection. Still come empty-handed to be killed, to be martyred. I mean, we don't hear this story. And only in February, early February 1979, Khomeini allows use of arm and use of going and taking over the military bases, because the state is not there anymore. The sovereign is gone as well. So, and every demonstration is million and a half. When Khomeini came to Iran, 3 million people out of 30 million Iranians go to welcome him. That's a revolution. That's the most rate of participation in the history of human being. Russian Revolution was won by 1% participation of the active populace at the time. French Revolution, 3%. Yeah? Here you have 10% of people actively participating in the revolution.
Ali, we've discussed the Islamic Revolution quite a bit now, but we can't truly understand Iran post-1979 without talking about the Iran-Iraq War, which happened in the 1980s. Obviously, in addition to the suffering and the trauma that it brought, and also the internal changes that happened as a result, it also allowed Iran to make numerous technological breakthroughs in drone and missile technology. So while Iran doesn't have a nuclear deterrent, it does have drones and ballistic missiles, which are very, very powerful. So it's pretty clear that the Iran-Iraq war is a pivotal moment in Iran's revolutionary history.
I mean, Iran-Iraq war is very interesting. As I said, when this revolutionary idea started propagating in the region, not only America was terrified of the outcome, but the Arab monarchies of the Persian Gulf were very scared. And so Saddam saw the opportunity, but then he was supported by every single of these monarchies. Saudi Arabia, Emirates, I think Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait at the time, Kuwait, which was invaded by Saddam later, all of them together, I think they paid $150 billion with 80s money, and they supported Saddam throughout the war. And Saddam traditionally was in Soviet camp, so it was receiving kind of arm and weapon from Soviet, and also was receiving from France, from Germany. It got its chemical agent for gassing people, gassing both Iranians and Iraqi cores from Germany. According to FP, towards the end of the war, America was giving a lot of satellite signals and information to Saddam for how to throw chemical bomb to Iran and how to gas Iranians. So Iran fought not only against Saddam, fought against America, Saudi, Kuwait, Emirates, Qatar, all these countries, Jordan, all these countries together. Israel definitely, and don't let this like information about the fact that Iran in one small episode has received some some arms and some parts for its like weapon, American weapons through Israel. The fact that Iran ever worked with Israel, that's like a semi-propaganda and is like a convoluted story.
This is the Iran-Contra scandal you're referring to.
Iran-Contra thing, exactly. So now Iran was basically single-handedly fighting with America and the whole region together. Why is it important? Because this level of autocracy had a kind of uninvited effect as well. It really toughened Iran. The famous line in Iran is, there was a time that they wouldn't sell barbed wire to us. So if you are not able to buy barbed wire in a global market because you are under sanctions and are monitoring every transaction that you do, what do? You start creating it yourself. For example, Iranian ballistic program today, which is powerful enough that Russia relies on it, according to Western reports. I don't know whether it's true or not, but they say Iran gives ballistic missile to Russia. Wow! If it's true, so all kudos to Iranians. How did it happen? Iran went to Gaddafi, begged for missiles. Gaddafi gave Iran six missiles because Saddam was bombing Iranian cities, was sending missiles, and with a full arsenal, and Iran was absolutely nothing, it was empty-handed. And so Gaddafi gave 6, but with one condition: 3 of them you have to throw to the Arab monarchies. Iran said, we are not in fight with them. Yeah? Gaddafi engineers came, they didn't give the know-how to Iranians. They said, we do it for you. Then Iran went to Syria, Hafez Assad Syria. They were worried about the fact that these are like Soviet-made, and if Moscow finds out, would not be happy. They didn't help Iran fully. And so from those 6 missiles given by Gaddafi, this person called Majid Tehrani Muqaddam, the father of Iran's missile program, got permission to reverse engineer one of them. And reverse engineering one of them gives us today this very sophisticated hypersonic missiles, ballistic missiles, and now they're talking about intercontinental missiles and things. From reverse engineering one of them, they went from 100 kilometer to 150 kilometer to 200 kilometer, absolutely empty-handed, yeah, and that's it. So again, Iran's Air Force was all F-4 and F-14 given by America to Shah, but they didn't give any parts to Iran for overhaul. So Iran tried to do some of them itself, buying some of the parts in black market much more expensively. But then the reason that Iran has such a strong missile program is they're using missile instead of air force. And that's very important for people who have some kind of military curiosity, because Iran is using missile in both a strategic and tactical way. Iran's missiles are very precise, and that's possibly the only country in the world which has advanced its missiles so much. Why? Because in other places like America, you don't need it. You have F-35. You buy airplanes which can come very precise. They do what they do. Iran didn't have airplanes, so they had to use their missiles in a very precise way. And also, Ayatollah Khamenei said from early 90s that you should make sure that you do not kill civilians, you do not do collateral damage. So they work so much that some of these missiles can do 10 meter in 10 meter. Yeah? And so in a sense, some people say this is similar to what Napoleon did. Napoleon didn't do a technological leap, just combined the old technologies together, put cannon on carriages and made it mobile. Yeah, by doing that, made the advancement. So Iran really worked on its missile things in order to become longer and more precise. And now it has something that no one can take it away from it. Why is it important? Because that's the difference between Iranian army and every other army in the region. Saudi Arabia might have many advanced, technologically advanced weaponry, but none of them are built by Saudis. Whereas if you tomorrow destroy all Iranian missile cities and do damage to everything, still the know-how is there. They can rebuild it in the next 6 months, as they did last year. In October 2024, Israel bombed Iran's manufacturing line of its solid fuel missile. Iran rebuilt it again before the war in June started. And from June until now, they've been rebuilding and refueling the arsenal. So this is very important to understand that at that 8 years war, which was very damaging and 220,000 Iranians got killed, but also is the source of Iran's military strength. America should know as well. The difference between IRGC and every other army in the region is these people have fought in their life. They fought day and night. And today, for them, is luxury war, because they can push a button and a missile goes. They've been fighting when they didn't have access to Kalashnikov. So they know how to fight empty-handed. And the reason that Iran managed to create a network of asymmetrical partners in the region was because it knew how to empower empty-handed forces who want to fight. Who are Ansarullah? People who had very little access to advanced weaponry. So in a sense, the reason I'm saying is, even if America disarm Iran from nuclear or attack Iran, attack part of Iran's arsenal, because they are claiming that we are going to attack and block down all your military, your missile cities, doesn't matter. These people know how to fight because they fought that 8 years war. Of course, you can argue that 8 years war happened in a different military paradigm. And that's one of the reasons that things are getting a bit murky and dangerous here, because now we are moving towards artificial intelligence paradigm of war. And in a sense, Iran might have been behind with the massive technological advancement that America and Israel have. And we saw that in the first day of war, how Israel, with amazing intelligence and the work of AI, could assassinate every single top commander of Iranian IRGC and army. Yes, they have the upper hand. But Iran's comeback, only after 8 hours, shows you that they have something much beyond technological advancement of America. The fact that you can replace every layer of IRGC, you can rebuild those missile cities which were destroyed, and come back and make the war to the end that Israel has to ask for ceasefire, tells you of the nature of Iran's military power, which was created during that 8 years traumatic war.
Well, I think what you spoke about there highlights how Iran is truly independent. I mean, you mentioned how there are these other states like Saudi Arabia, which might have lots of expensive and impressive military technology, but who are still reliant on Western engineers, Western manufactured parts, whereas Iran can build and administer its own technology. And in warfare, that I think is absolutely essential, because it's not just about the technology that you have. War is also won because of the other factors at play, and what truly matters are stamina, resilience.
Before you go to the question, just add one important piece. Iran, as I said, knows how to fight and go to war empty-handed, but also knows how to fight wars in the cheapest possible way. As I said, I asked someone who, I'm not an expert in military, but I asked someone who is expert in military, why America, France, Britain didn't create such advanced missile technology. The answer was their military complex wouldn't allow them, because F-35 is a $2 trillion project. Iranian missiles are like $150,000, $200,000.
Well, even the US THAAD missiles that were expended during the 12-day war last year in defense of the Zionist entity cost a huge amount of money. I mean, the US used, I think it was a quarter of their global arsenal, which was around 150 missiles, to shoot down the Iranian ones. And that will cost something like $2 billion to replace over at least 1 year of rebuilding. And the Iranian missiles, by comparison, didn't cost anything like that.
And that's how Iran changed the game in Ukraine, I think, because Russia, of course, is a very advanced country. I mean, has oceanic like missiles, has like nuclear arsenal, etc. But realized that the design of the West with Ukraine was not to have a classic war, was trying to bleed Russia economically. And very soon, Russia turned to Iran, asked Iran for help for its Shahed drones and for other weaponry that Iran had. Same happened in Saudi-Yemen war, because every time Ansarullah sent a fleet of cheaply made drones, Saudi, in order to stop it, had to shoot a cartridge of very expensive anti-missile things. And so that would cost Saudi $50 million to deter and stop something which cost Yemenis with Iranian technology of less than $300,000-$400,000. So in a sense, that unevenness in the war gives Iran edge. I think that's combined with Iran's resilience and the ideology, which still is in IRGC, is important. So I'm saying all of these things for one conclusion, that the imagery in the West and Western media constantly pumped and hyped that Trump is going to attack Iran. 24 hours later, Iran will be finished. Like Maduro, they're going to take away Khamenei, and that's it. These images don't work in Iran. With all respect to Venezuela, which is a revolutionary country, and I've been there, and I think they are going to, I'm sure they are capable of defending their own revolution, but Iran is not Venezuela. Iran is a country that whatever malice you want to impose on it, you already have done in the last 47 years. So your venom has already doesn't work anymore. Because
But is this not a threat that Iran should be taking seriously? I mean, we've seen the moving of a US aircraft carrier, dozens of aircraft refuelers. So the threat of war remains on the cards. I mean, some people have said that this won't be an all-out war, but will instead be some kind of surgical strike aimed at Iran's leadership. Is that not something that Iran should be taking seriously?
No, Iran should take it seriously. I mean, it's going to be war. No one wants war. No one wants war, especially people who have had a war in the history. And I think, but the question is, to what end? So look at that. From 2020, Iran has taken a different path called strategic patience. From the moment that Trump assassinated Qasem Soleimani, Iran take it back and thought, okay, what do we want? Do we want to go head-to-head with the declining empire? And declining empires are like crazy animals who may damage mid-sized countries while they're going down themselves, or not. And Saddar Hajizadeh, General Hajizadeh, who is now who got martyred in June 2025 by Israel, said, we decided not to go all the way because we don't want to take the country 20 years back. Why is so? Because sanctions get to your head. You think, if I lose infrastructure, when am I going to be able to build it again? So they didn't do that. Fine. Then they assassinated Raisi, and everyone knows that is an assassination done by Israel. It's a silent, humiliating story that, but what could Iran do? Because when you can see, I mean, with the global media on the side of Israel, what could you do? If Iran would attack back Israel without having enough evidence, Iran would be the warmonger. So Iran's hands were tied. The only chance Iran could do was like doing an operation of the same nature, intelligence, mixed with like security breach. And Iran doesn't have that kind of role inside Israel, because Israel, when Israel is doing such an assassination against Iran, is using American intelligence, French intelligence, British intelligence, German intelligence, Saudi intelligence, Jordanian intelligence, Emirati intelligence, Bahrain, so Azerbaijani intelligence. So it's different things. So Iran doesn't have that capability. So Iran decided to swallow it and take the bullet. So when they assassinated Haniyeh again, Iran again decided not to respond. When they came for Iran itself, Iran again showed maximum restraint in the 12 days war. The moment Israel proposed a ceasefire, Iran accepted it, because Iran doesn't want to go to all-out war. But now things are different, because now either taking Ayatollah Khamenei or creating this hybrid warfare, which is creating an existential threat to Iran, will be met by different response from Iran.
Well, this is something that I did want to discuss, because with the 12-day war last year, some have said that Iran agreed to a ceasefire too quickly. They had volleys of missiles ready to fire at the Zionist entity, and they had a lot more leverage, and so they didn't actually have to agree to that ceasefire. Surely in any forthcoming war, which some say will be the final war and an existential war, Iran will now need to display its full military capabilities.
America has been attacking Iran always somehow way below the existential threshold and level. So in the gray area in which Iran could almost like dodge a bullet or just swallow and move. But now things are different. When they assassinated Qasem Soleimani, in my opinion, that was an existential threat, because Qasem Soleimani was not a person. Qasem Soleimani was the symbol of Iranian nationalism, revolution, the axis of resistance, and was the person who could take Iran politically, internally, to through any storm. So, for example, if Ayatollah Khamenei dies tomorrow, for the transition, I think Soleimani would be a key figure. If they want to go for this Bonapartist option to suspend the republic momentarily for a couple of years in order to resolve the issues, as many people talk inside Iran, Soleimani would be a figure to do so. So, in a sense, Trump's choice of getting Soleimani was multifaceted, and it was damaging. So, if I was Republic after Soleimani, I would take it as existential threat, and I would have gone full force, as many people realize now, retrospectively. But they decided no. They thought it's not existential threat. 7th of October, they realized it's dangerous, but then they took it back again themselves, and they took strategic patience. I don't think they advised Said Hassan in Lebanon, Said Hassan Nasrallah in Lebanon, but he, looking at Iran, I think he also acted like Iranians. He brought too much political, social decision from Lebanon's internal politics into his military decision-making, which was at the end detrimental to him and to Hezbollah's power. So instead of going full force, he measured his answer, because he wanted the Druze, he wanted Christians, he wanted Sunnis in Lebanon to be on board. He didn't want to be seen as working against national interests of Lebanon. Inside Iran as well, every military decision that Iranian State, Revolutionary Guard, and Ayatollah Khamenei take, it has a lot of limitations inside Iran as well. It's not only regional, international, and military limitation. It has inside Iran do reformists come on board, or do they go against us? Do they try to create dissent against us inside? Are they going to backstab us? What about like Iran's bourgeoisie, or talk about Zargani, the Chamber of Commerce? Are they going to create shortage inside or not? So the state is not very strong after 14 years of sanction. Remember, yeah, it's a weakened state. So that's why, in a sense, they didn't do that. After 7th of October, they didn't do that. After assassination of Raisi, they didn't do that. After Haniyeh's assassination inside Tehran, they didn't do that. How humiliating that your guest is being assassinated and you cannot respond. Why didn't do that? Because Javad Zarif, the foreign minister, whose 2 children have American passport in the pocket, and still is talking about making détente with America. He said, no, we're going to use this as a leverage to make peace with Americans. Americans officially deceived Iranians. Yeah? So Haniyeh got assassinated early August, a day after Pezeshkian became Iran's official president. And Iran thought Americans would sit down on a negotiation table with Iran. Biden administration, Zarif and Pezeshkian went to UN. Netanyahu used that time that they were in UN to attack Lebanon and do the pager attack. Zarif and Pezeshkian were not given opportunity to meet with anyone in Biden administration. Nothing. They came empty-handed, and Nasrallah got killed. So another lesson. And so in the 12 days war as well, they thought, okay, we gave the opposition a lesson. They know how strong we are, but let's not go to all-out war. But now I think it's different. Now a significant part of Iranian population have been weaponized by America, by Israel. As I said, whether Mossad agents worked directly on the streets or not is a secondary matter. The fact that a part of Iranian society, due to pressure of sanctions, economic mismanagement, this endless media warfare and information warfare, have become these agents of a fascist movement, is even more dangerous than having Mossad agents inside Iran. And Mossad agents can be found, can be detected, and the problem solved. But when you have like 5%, 10% of your society turned into Islamophobic people who want to burn down mosques, burn down any element of your cultural heritage, that's much more dangerous. That's what happened in Syria. The elements who came from outside Syria could have been detected, and the local community, at the end, they would have come to their senses. But then when your own youth turned to Daesh, your own youth became ISIS, that was much more dangerous. And that's the phenomena we are dealing with Iran today. I think Iranian state should know that with weaponization of the populace, part of the populace, with the strangulation of Israel in the region, with the weakening of Iranians' partners and allies in the region, they are not coming to weaken Iran this time. They're coming to finish Iran off. This is truly an existential threat. And so if Trump touch Iran, I think Iranians know they have to fight back. And fighting back means not throwing missiles to empty parts of Ain al-Assad and al-Udaid. The only leverage that Iran has had against America in the last 25 years, America's endless campaign in this region, in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and others, have been to send American personnel back in the coffin. And that's the only way Iran found some leverage. And they've been refrained from doing so. So I think in this time, it's going to be different. And I think Trump knows this himself. He knows that this is not going to be a easy way of kind of fighting covertly, that you bring your B-2, you throw the bomb, and that's it. Clean war. It's going to be, the price is going to be the dead American personnel, and for Trump, it's going to be massive political problem inside the country. That's why we are seeing this hesitation on Trump's side. But I think every hand of IRGC in Iran is on trigger. They're waiting this time.
One thing I just want to pick up on and develop a bit further is this question of radicalization, which is the only way to describe it, which is driven by propaganda from the exterior, and which is persistent and incessant I mean, the Islamic Republic is now cracking down on that external propaganda. We saw a shutting down of the internet in Iran to help block that propaganda from entering the country, although the internet is now being restored. And we've seen reports that collaboration with networks like Iran International and Manuto will now be considered to be a terrorist crime. Who is behind these propaganda networks? Who funds them? And what's their aim? Because they don't just seem to have a following among the Iranian diaspora, but also within Iran, which is actually radicalizing people.
So they started, from mid-90s, America has had many projects around Iran, like many other countries, as part of pro-democracy movement and civil society movement. But so that's why in 1998, when Tehran University uprising happened, there were many NGOs already working. From 2000 onward, Tehran was filled by NGOs, and the state only realized many of these NGOs are receiving money directly from NED, from USAID in Tehran. It was already too late. So by 2007, 2008, when they started they cracked down on NGOs, they were already creating a community of people working around that language.
And I should just say, for the benefit of our viewers, that the NED is the National Endowment for Democracy, which is effectively the CIA funding cutouts to do their dirty work.
That's right, yeah, many of them, yeah. So you have Radio Zamaneh, which at the time, which is based in Holland, got its funding from HIVOS Foundation. HIVOS got its money from NED. You have BBC Persian service, which is very interesting because BBC services get their money from license fee payers, but not BBC Persian service. It gets its money from FCO, Foreign and Commonwealth Office. I heard that from BBC kind of personnel themselves. They can verify, but it was from license fee for a while, but then it started getting money from FCO. And then you have like someone like Iran Wire by Maziar Bahari, who has received $22 million so far from various sources, including a State Department. Then you have Manoto TV, which came in 2010, unknown sources, which got about 120 million. I started questioning them in 2018, and by that time they had received $97 million already, unknown source, but many people speculate that the source was Israel. Yeah? And then you have Iran International, which at the beginning got its money from Saudis. Guardian wrote in 2018 October that Al-Qahtani was behind it. Qahtani, who was involved in Khashoggi's case as well, and then it was hidden through a company called Volant TV. But then in 2022, apparently it's been handed over to Israelis because Saudis made a rapprochement with Iran. So BBC Persian Service, Manoto, Iran International, Voice of America, Radio Zamaneh, Radio Farda, Radio Free Europe, and then endless operations inside Iranian Twitter sphere, inside Iranian Instagram sphere is massive, is unbelievable. And I think there are two mistakes. One, Iranians went to fight against them in a old-fashioned way, banning satellite, going to people's roof, trying to take the satellite, etc. And they didn't understand that fighting against this, you need to update your own media operations. They didn't. Maybe they didn't have the know-how, maybe they didn't have the budget for this, or maybe they ideologically they were confused because Iran's IRIB, Islamic Republic Broadcasting, still talk in the language of 1980s with their own very strong base. It cannot appeal to young generation, cannot appeal to increasing number of people with discontent or critique of the state. Yeah? So that's why it cannot defend against this massive onslaught of these media. Then Iran International changed the game. Let me just first talk about Manoto. Manoto was very interesting because it came in a very benign and innocent way. People called it Manoto kindergarten because it had these pastel colors everywhere, beautiful young men and women, all like with like colorful dress, pink, pastel colors. And it just was talking about Pahlavi Iran in a very nostalgic way. We think, why are they doing that? Why are they doing that? Now I understand why they do that. Because they created a generation who truly believed in their propaganda. And they had a program called Time Tunnel, which would take you all the way to Pahlavi Iran, the dances, the ballets, the theaters, the beautiful dress. And they wouldn't tell you that. This is like creme a la creme of 0.1% of Iranian society at the time. The same thing, if you like, Venezuelan diaspora do that, showing Caracas before Chavez. But they don't say that. It was like 1% of Venezuela.
They don't say that 90% of the population in Venezuela was living in poverty or extreme poverty at that time. And actually, you see this everywhere with people looking back with rose-tinted spectacles. Even here in Britain, you have people watching programs about the British aristocracy and thinking, oh, wasn't it so nice in that time, so traditional? Well, at that time, there were people forced into workhouses and children climbing up chimneys and various types of exploitation and poverty.
If you think of like 19th century as BBC Pride and Prejudice drama rather than exactly thinking of like child labor dying by the age of 10 or 11. So in a sense that worked. And alongside that, Iran International, which very interesting, when it came around 2017, one of the first things it did, there was a terrorist attack in Ahvaz. There was a military parade by normal, ordinary soldiers, many of them doing their draft, doing their compulsory military service. 40 people got killed. And they went and interviewed the spokesperson of the terrorist organization who did it. And they started saying that, hi, thank you very much for giving us our time. What was the motivation of your action? And everyone realized they are normalizing assassination, car bombing, explosion, and Iranian diplomats in London, they were absolutely incompetent to take them to Ofcom or take their kind of lawsuit against them because they were based in London at the time, and they should have like really taken a case against them. A TV channel is promoting car explosion in one of Iranian big cities. What would happen if Press TV would have done the same to us in Britain? Is unimaginable. And that was Iran International. They were very like, the gloves were off. And in 2022, during Women Life Freedom, they acted like the headquarters for hybrid warfare. They would tell people where to go for demonstration. They would tell people how to fight against the security forces, working directly from Mossad rulebook. Yeah? And unbelievably, I mean, because there's only 24-hour network day and night, and the messaging is very hard. I never thought Iranians will buy this, but they apparently is just really infiltrating to more and more Iranian houses. And I think that was one of the important operations which created this really angry force of annihilation, which we saw a glimpse of it on 8th and 9th of January.
One final thing that I want to touch on, Ali, is the unhinged elements of the Iranian diaspora. I mean, lots of people in the West are puzzled by these people, don't understand them, but some are actually influenced or pressured by them. I know some of these elements have even made death threats against you. Explain to us who these people are, because they're not all the same. You have people associated with Mujahideen Khalq, or the MEK, which is a terrorist organization. And then you have the monarchists who support the Pahlavi family. And then you have others who aren't associated with those two. What are these movements in the diaspora?
So again, I mean, Iranian diaspora is a big community. It's about 7 or 8 million people. And what we've seen from these people is a small minority. I mean, I know they say 35,000 people came out in Toronto, in Canada. It's a big number. They came out when it was like freezing cold. But the number of Iranians in Canada is much more than that. So I think the majority of Iranians in diaspora have been silent so far, and they've been just watching the events. Yeah? These are like more hardcore radical elements inside. And among these like regime changers in diaspora, there are different elements. Some of them have more legitimate causes. They've been in prison in Iran. They've been normal people fighting for civil rights and things. But then, as we had predicted before, the part which become hegemonic, especially in diaspora, is the one which has the support of Washington, London, Tel Aviv, and Brussels. And in 2022, these forces were like watching, hedging the bet, seeing who is more powerful. So you had this committee of 8 people as a leadership of Women Life Freedom. Pahlavi was one of them. Masih Alinejad was the other one. This other guy, Hamed Esmailium, whose wife got killed in Ukrainian plane in January 2020 was the other one. This actress, this football player, Golshifte Farahani and things. So it was a combination of these groups. And then this time, things changed. Because Israel went behind the wheel directly, said, we don't want anything. We want someone who can deliver fast. We don't have time for pretense of democracy. And so they came up with Pahlavi, who I think made a contract with them. Very simple, very open. He made a contract and he is using the language. Everything comes directly from Israeli rule book among Pahlavists. This is not conspiracy theory. Pahlavi's main advisor, Saeed Qaseminejad, works for FDD, Foundation for Defense for Democracy, with Mark Dubowitz, which is getting all his help from Likud party and from Netanyahu. Pahlavi went in 2022 to meet with Netanyahu. The information minister in Israel has come to London, has gathered all these like Iranian journalists, especially Iran International, has had like close meeting with them, telling them what to do. And those goons and thugs on the streets in London and other places which create, they're using scaremongering tactics and they attack people. They use quite fascistic style of destroying any alternative voice. They work very closely with Tommy Robinson forces. And I think even the coordinator is Emily Schrader, who has history back in IDF, is coming to London every now and then, meet with them, tell them what to do. So there's a coordination between kind of Israeli embassy, these monarchist goons, and the elements of EDL, and Tommy Robinson's kind of and that kind of fascistic elements. Why do I say that? Because previous to this round of anti-Iranian state demonstrations, these people had rehearsals for 2.5 years. These are the forces who met every week to do the counter demonstrations among massive pro-Palestinian demonstrations.
I've seen that myself going to pro-Palestine demonstrations in London. You know, the counter demonstrators don't just have Zionist flags, they also have the Pahlavist Shahi flag as well.
Every time. They've been preparing for this moment. They almost like they merge the flags. It's like a merge of a kind of joint venture of this. And also, there were radical elements that would come. Like, I wouldn't do that. I don't have that kind of thuggish bravery to go to a 1 million demonstration with a placard, try to provoke them to beat me up, so create unrest in the demonstration. So these people working hand in hand with each other. And one thing about Mossad and Israeli tactic is you have to be as strong as possible. You have to be as violent as possible. So these people are not terrified. Are still coming to demonstration. They're still coming online to say, we don't like Iranian state, but we don't like Pahlavi either. Go for them. Rape threaten to kill them. They don't back off. Threaten to kill the children, publish their address, go really, really like close, beat them up on the street if you see them. So the rule, I'm saying that to people who are watching, and many of them have been traumatized by these tactics. You are not accidental or incidental victims of these type of tactics. These are designed to push you out of political arena. These are designed to stop you making any voice. So someone who looks from outside think not majority, but absolute majority has made allegiance with Pahlavi, with Israel, and no one else says anything else. I've been working on Iran 17 years now. It's 2026. And I've been monitoring Iranian social media, online space for 17 years. And in the first 2 days after this round of unrest, same as Women Life Freedom, when I would go down on my kind of timelines, even I would think something new has happened. The country has fallen to monarchies. So they know how to create this effect, because there are lots of behind the scene messaging, behind the scene threatening. So look at that. Most of kebab shops, in the Iranian kebab shops and restaurants in London, have a big Pahlavi poster in front of them saying that non-Pahlavi people are not allowed to come in. Why? They get threatened. Yeah? If you are not in line with them, if you are not on board with them, they can threaten you, they can break your glasses. So they use all known classical fascistic tactics mixed with online fascistic tactics to create this totalitarian style. But nonetheless, I think as kudos to strength of Iran's civil society, many people have already come out and talked very loudly. Many of the opposition figures. In my own show, Jedaal, I've had people whose partners, whose wife and husband have been executed in 1980s by Iranian state. And they came out and they said, one, we do not accept Pahlavi. Two, we do not want any foreign intervention. If there is a change, it has to come from within the country and by own people. So in a sense, I think it didn't work. It would have only worked if everything would succeed in a very short time, 2 days, 3 days. Israeli tactics are all designed around blitzkrieg, same as the attack on Iran. If first day Iran would surrender, win-win for Israel. But if Iran continue for day 7, day 9, day 10, then suddenly cracks in Israel's defense system appear. Same as here now. You would look back to the 2 weeks ago and you would think Pahlavi is the next president or king of Iran. Now he looks like nothing. And European Parliament didn't even allow him to enter and give a speech. And Trump didn't give him a meeting as well. So even the Westerners didn't put all their eggs in his baskets. And so maybe he's going to be pushed and be replaced by another puppet. But at the moment, in that short, intense period, it looked like they've won. So my recommendation to anyone who is seeing this, don't be terrified by these violence, by this disgusting, really vile violence. Is designed to deprive you of your basic right to express your opinion. Fight them. If you don't fight them now online, you're going to fight them tomorrow on the streets.
Well, that's a pretty good place to wrap up, Ali, and I wish more power and strength to you. I found your output to be quite insightful and informative, and I particularly appreciate the critical lens that you bring as well. And I think it's interesting that you touched on the title of the show, which is Attrition. We are in a war of attrition, and when they go for their blitzkrieg tactics, we can overcome ultimately by being resilient and by continuing to fight the long war. But Ali, thank you very much indeed for joining me today.
Thank you very much. And if I add one more line, these are nihilistic forces. Israel is a source of fascism and nihilism in today's world. And they try to destroy communities, divide families, put brother in front of sister and brother. And so I think in these very hard times, both around Iranian issues, but also in Europe, in the West, in Middle East, in West Asia, in order to fight against imperialism and Zionism, people should keep the communities together and try to constantly keep the dialogue and try to enlighten those who buy these media disinformation wars, rather than allowing the alienation within communities. So keep together and fight with them from within the community.
Well, thank you very much for that, Ali. I'm afraid we're going to have to call it to an end there. I'd encourage everyone to follow you and your work, and I really appreciate you joining me today. And I also want to say thank you very much to all of our listeners and viewers. If you enjoy this content, please make sure to like this video and to subscribe to the channel. Help us to overcome the algorithmic limitations that we're facing, and we'll see you on the next one.